I'm going to call the September 17th, 2019 meeting of the White Bear Lake Conservation District Board to order. We have a quorum. We've called order, so we're on item 3, approval of the agenda.
So moved. Or do you want to amend it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does anybody have any items that they'd like to amend on the agenda? Mike?
Under lake quality, I would like to add Phragmites bid.
This is the prior meeting agenda, right? Or is that tonight's agenda?
September
Tonight.
17th?
Okay.
I think that's today.
Let's run with that. Okay, Phragmites bid. Any other modifications to the agenda? Okay. I'll make a motion then that we approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That passes. Approval, next item on the agenda is approval of the prior board meeting minutes from our August 20th, 2019 meeting. Did anybody see anything in those minutes that should be adjusted? Mike?
Under item 9, for lake temperature, it was 76 degrees. It's not, it just says that it was same as last month, but that doesn't tell us what it was.
Oh, I must have printed out an older version because I went back when I found that, but I'll fix it.
76.
Okay, and the one I have has 76, Mike, just.
Oh, really?
Mine does too. 76
But this
degrees.
was one, not the one maybe that you printed out, but the one that was
I
in there.
printed the one off of the website.
Yeah, so maybe look
Yeah.
underneath your.
Yeah.
Well, Yep. Okay, so the 76 is in the minutes, it looks like. Okay, other? Okay,
Looks like number 11, then the treasurer's report to really be 12, so there's a missing number.
okay, so that needs some formatting there.
11, 12. What was that? I'm so sorry. What?
Under, item 11 is listed as lake education.
Yeah.
And the next item under that is treasurer's
Oh,
report with no
missing a
number.
headline. Gotcha.
Yeah, just need a number 12 there, and then the
Just a
others will go to
typo.
13, 14, 15.
Okay, yeah.
Anything else? Okay, I'll make a motion, we approve the August minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, so that passes. Public comment? Assume there's none.
We have no public here.
New business, there are no new business items. Unfinished business. The only unfinished business, and maybe I should have added this, are the buoys. And I think that we've had that discussion, and that we settled that the buoys are not ours to enforce. They are the sheriff's departments at the two counties that have the lake or that include the lake, and that our effort should be to encourage the law enforcement entities to enforce their rules. And do I have that right, generally speaking, Alan?
Chair and Board, I believe we talked about this at the Executive Committee where we actually met with representatives of Ramsey County, and they did acknowledge that it is their purview. They showed us the application that the public would generally use to apply for what essentially is a marker that you put on the buoy, and that provides some evidence to them that you've got the permission, if you will, from the county. I believe they said it was free, so it's really more of just controlling what's out there and knowing what's out there in case it gets loose or some such thing, or if there's an accident, it can be identified, and it's really so they can chase down who's responsible or who needs to be contacted when something happens relative to that buoy. I think we had talked about maybe putting a link to that application on our website, so that we could encourage, I think is what we had decided, people to take advantage of that, for a variety of reasons. I do think that they did say that it needs to abide by standards that they have. And so if we're deferring that control to them, then I would also say that the standards should be also maintained by them as well. So That close, sir?
Yep. Now, that sounds right to me. Does anybody think we need to have further discussion on that? Mike?
Well, is that buoys outside of an AUDA?
All buoys.
All buoys.
Don't we say buoys in our ordinance, though? I don't have it in front of me, so I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I mean, our ordinance says that we can issue a permit for a buoy outside the ADUA,
Yeah.
but the county, Ramsey County at least, I don't know what Washington County says, has got to be within 100 feet of shore.
Well, it has to be within 100 feet of shore. Okay.
Yeah?
And I think the conversation went on to say that, they regulate all buoys that are in the lake. So I think the way we look at buoys, or the board looks at buoys, is if it's beyond your ADUA for some reason, get a permit. And more importantly, I think if it's a multi-user buoy, then you want to have it permitted by this body. So we're not getting into just putting out a little buoy for someone's sailboat within their ADUA, but that doesn't excuse people from having that on file with the county. So I think that was one distinction that was really helpful for us to hear from them, that
How far out does
that's
an
the case.
ADUA go?
It depends on the level of the lake, obviously. So the lower the lake, I think it's the maximum is 300,
200 feet or up to 300 or 4 feet of water, whichever comes first.
right?
Okay.
So there really isn't much.
The swim platform is getting way the heck out there, so.
He's got 200 feet to throw it. I know I've got some calls on that as
Yeah.
well.
Okay.
We can go out and measure it.
I don't want to measure.
So those would be my observations about what they had to say, so
Okay.
it was helpful.
So do we need to change our ordinances?
Not from my perspective. I assume that if you had a multi-user buoy, you'd still want it permitted in the same way that you would any other multi-user facility in someone's ADUA, right? And if it's beyond the ADUA, I would expect that you'd want it permitted as well. And those are the two conditions that you have on permitting.
Yeah, I mean, we could put a note in the ordinances to see the counties. I mean, I don't know where else you could put it. I mean, if you're looking, what are the rules on buoys, that's where you'd look.
And if you wanted to, as a board, pass a manipulation of that language that recognizes that the province of all buoys in the lake is the county for licensure, you could certainly do that.
I think that's a really good idea. I think we should add something to say that all buoys should be licensed by your appropriate county sheriff's department.
Make it in the form of a motion.
Here, just before we do that, Mike?
I think we should maintain permitting buoys as our ordinance state. And case in point would be Mataska Beach, where the city has 40 buoys out there.
We still do. You're not talking about taking away ours, right? It's just that they should still be permitted by the sheriff.
Okay. Well, which would they would be both then?
Essentially.
Yeah.
In the appropriate case, yes. So I think the question was whether or not to eliminate the regulation on this level at all. And I
So
would
we're not
say
giving up anything.
I would not recommend that you do that, because the only two conditions that we do it in are exceptional to what we would normally say, you're on your own until you're not, right?
So basically, in this scenario, which is the scenario we live in at the moment, the sheriff's departments are responsible for permitting every buoy on the lake. We are responsible also for permitting every buoy on the lake. However, we don't require a permit if the buoy is inside your ADUA.
Close. I would say that yes to the first part of the question.
Yep.
If it's in the water and it's a buoy, the sheriff wants to have a little Ramsey County sticker shape that has a number that they issue, so that if something happens on that buoy and they get called out, they know what number to look up so they can associate it with a home and an owner. So that's every buoy, whether it's within an ADUA, without, it does not matter. And so we step in and say, we don't regulate things within the ADUA unless, in this case, it's multi-user or it's outside of the ADUA. So if you have a single sailboat buoy in your ADUA, you guys don't want to see a permit for it, right? Just like you don't want to see permits for docks that have less than this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
The board doesn't, but the sheriff's department might.
With respect to buoys, yes.
Yep, got it.
And remember, it's free, and I'm not sure if enforcement wouldn't mean if someone got caught, just being told, hey, apply and get a sticker for your buoy.
Yeah.
right? Because
It
I
also
don't
has to-
know, we didn't ask the question of, is there a criminal consequence for not having it properly applied? And so I can't really answer that question as I sit here today. But I would guess that because it's really for their informational purposes, because very rarely are you going to get in trouble with your buoy just by having it. So I think it's more of an identification thing than a safety thing.
And I think also the Ramsey County requires anyway that the buoy is X big and
Standards.
white with a blue stripe, something like that.
And I would defer to them for any requirements they have, because again, they're the ones that want to permit all of them, not some of them.
Yep.
You know, if one came before you for a multi-user or something like that, I think you'd be in a position to say it should meet these standards.
Yep.
So I haven't seen one of those since I've been here.
Nobody brings them necessarily to us, but I know for a fact that Gene Alstott gets his is registered.
With the county.
Here he did not,
County.
for the
He-
first time,
He didn't for the first time? Okay.
With us or with the county?
with us.
Yeah, he might have with the county, though.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think then the net is that we don't make any changes to our ordinance. If there's a buoy issue, generally, if it's in the ADUA and somebody complains that the buoy's not the right shape, form, whatever, we would refer that to the sheriff's department.
Right.
And if there's any other kind of buoy that somebody takes exception to it being the correct type of buoy, that would also be referred to the sheriff's departments.
Assuming we haven't permitted it, and if we have, I would expect that the board would have vetted the propriety of what was being put out there, so, yeah.
Yeah. I think we do need to put a sentence in the ordinances, because that's where you look it up. I could write that, send it to Alan, and bring it to next month.
Perfect, thank
Is
you.
that okay?
Yep.
Very good. And the caveat to all that would be simply that we don't know if those specific requirements are equivalent on the Washington County side, because we didn't have Washington County there. So we're only talking about half the lake at this point, so.
Yeah.
Less than half the lake.
And I could not find their list of requirements that would correspond to what Ramsey County says, which goes beyond what the state says.
Not to preview my report, but I'm working on that, so stay tuned.
Okay. So I missed that little bit. Should we have Kim call Washington County to encourage them to do something similar to Ramsey, or should we have you call them? Or
I'm working on that. I've been in contact with
perfect.
them
Okay.
regarding some of the other discussions we had, and it'll just save us time later. Some of the discussions we had with Ramsey County was length of patrols, days patrolling, basically service limitations and expectations. And so since Washington County rather wasn't at the table, we weren't able to actually talk to them about what their companion patrol looks like. I did find out in speaking with the, I guess you could call it the commander, or the equivalent over in Washington County, they're a reactive body, so they don't actively patrol the lake just because they have so much water to patrol and a very limited patrol base to work from. So it sounds like they do have a traveling sheriff that's able to respond, and they have done that a couple of times this year when there's been a call out from Ramsey County for an assist. My guess is it would be on days like the 4th of July when it's really busy. But generally speaking, they do not commit any full-time or part-time staff to the patrol of the lake. In other words, park car, get in boat, go out, run around on the lake. Ramsey does that pursuant to the fact that we pay them, a supplemental to have a warm body in a boat on the lake. So I asked for some of the statistics from Washington County. Haven't had a chance to get them because that was just last week's conversation. But as soon as I get that material, I'll give it to you guys so you know exactly what they're up to. So, because they've issued citations and warnings and whatnot. And I said it's just been a while since we've really seen what you guys have done out there. So stay tuned. And I'll obviously ask about buoy enforcement and whatnot.
Yeah, thank you, Alan.
Yeah.
Mike?
I have to, I don't have ordinances with me tonight, but I recall in writing those, and the interpretation or the intention was that somebody who did not have lake access or easement or any of that type of thing from maybe even out of the area or out of the state and that they could not come in and just plunk a buoy outside somebody's authorized dock use area and tie up their boat. And so that was, we're trying to regulate that.
That sounds right. It sounds like you cannot have one outside of an ADUA without a permit, which is why we do
Without our
that.
permit. Ramsey County could just give them a permit because they don't really know where it is, or, they probably want to know who owns the buoy, but,
I think their requirements are that it would be inside that, so,
well, we don't know that.
no.
We're not dropping ours anyway, so that would still be
Yeah.
us.
So I think still was that.
So we still retain that,
Yeah.
which I
And it
think
did
is
happen, and
good.
there's still one on the lake.
There is
that-
still
That does
one.
happen.
Okay. We will
I'm
hunt
going
them
to
down.
talk to my city about that.
That's it for me.
Okay, so Scott will recommend some, or suggest some text to adjust our ordinance. Alan will follow up with Washington County on their buoy regulations, and I think that's good.
All right, I'll work with Scott, and we'll see you next month on that.
Okay.
All right, thanks,
That is
everyone.
unfinished business, Madam Clerk.
Okay, and that's it for unfinished business. We're on to reports, action items, the executive committee report. Executive committee met September 9th, and the primary purpose of the meeting was to meet with the Water Patrol from Ramsey County to try to get a better handle on how our relationship with them worked. Alan already touched on it a little bit in regards to Washington County. In regards to Ramsey County, they gave us some information, summary of their information on when they're out there, and I had intended for that to be in everybody's board packet, but I failed to get it into the queue in time. So that's my bad, but it'll be in your next month's. But generally speaking, what we found out in the meeting is that the patrols are generally on the weekend, say generally 11 to 6, Saturday and Sunday. All of the patrol time on the lake comes from the funding that we give to the county, to the Water Patrol. I'm going to say this, and then you and Mark disagree with me if I don't get it right. They do get a $30,000 grant from the federal government to do some boat inspections on shore, and so the person that's using those funds on shore will also keep an eye out for things related to the lake. But I don't think they use that time for that money for any lake time. And I think that a decision the board's going to have to make, and I wouldn't suggest that we make it tonight, but I think that we should think about it before we enter into our agreement with Ramsey County next year, is are we interested in upping that level of their time out on the lake? The other thing is that, they have two rates, a $70 an hour basically, and a $40 an hour generally. The 40 is for part-time, and that's the rate that we pay with the funds that we provide to Ramsey County. And so if we upped it, theoretically, we would still be paying for part-time, so $41 an hour.
The only thing, I maybe understood it incorrectly. I understood it that I think it was 41 or 40, and then overtime was 70. But I could be wrong on that.
I'll chime in to further add confusion. Full-time staff, their full-time deputies are $71 an hour employees. The part-timers are 41 because they're non-benefit earning, and it's just basically cash. So we don't necessarily pay a lesser rate. They choose to staff the patrols that are on the lake with part-timers, mostly to give better value to you for your money because of the fact that it's just stretched that much farther when they use part-time folks. And so that's why they do that. It equivocates itself to a much longer shift, and you get it all summer. And so as it related to adding to that, I think it's safe to say that the commander said more is better. So he said it can't hurt, and he said it's kind of critical for keeping an eye on the lake that you're doing it in the first place, because otherwise they would probably be as reactionary as Washington County is and probably not staff anyone because it's $71 an hour. It's just too expensive to do that when you're essentially using now Ramsey County dollars and not just yours. Is that fair?
Yeah. Just to be clear here, so the amount of money we give them is enough for Saturday and Sunday, usually, doesn't sound like they're committing, from 11 to 6 on Saturdays and Sundays. What is that for all weekends between, like, say, Memorial Weekend and Labor Day weekend?
That's my recollection from the information I saw, Scott.
And there's no patrols on holidays. I guess there'd be 3 holidays in that span, right? Memorial Day, Labor Day, and 4th of July, which can really be a zoo.
I don't recall seeing any,
I just saw a cop out there last week.
I don't recall seeing on the timesheet that they gave us, or the summary sheet that they gave us, I don't recall seeing the 4th. But I'm sure they had people out there. It just might not have, I don't know, it might have been normal or regular duty. I don't know why it wasn't included, or it could be, Scott, that my memory's not that great. So I think where we leave it is that by next month's meeting, we'll have that in everybody's packet so that we can chat about it a bit. But to Alan's point, I think it's important that we continue to fund this in some way, and that we may want to consider funding it at a higher level. And I think that's a conversation that we can have as we get closer to entering into the agreement with the Ramsey County Sheriff's Department. Does anybody have any questions about that? Mike?
What are we funding it at now?
So we fund 120 hours, and I think our budget amount is it around 4,200?
Budget amount is $6,000.
$6,000. So,
The contracted, we pay $41 an hour, and it seems like we paid them $3,600 the summer, last year. We
Yeah, so-
haven't gotten this year's bill, but
so the 6,000 at 41 is 146 hours.
Okay.
So it's in that
So
120.
we haven't paid them yet or anything. But, the 4,200 was kicked around all summer. That was last year's. That was 18, and it's really 6,000.
Oh, yeah.
So I just wonder if we got 6,000, if we got that many hours.
Yeah, so they, regularly, or typically, they provide a summary at the end of the season. We just kind of jumped in early because we were having this discussion as a board. Okay, anything else discussion-wise on that item? Okay, that's it for the executive committee report, but just to recap that, we will raise this item again as we get closer to entering into the agreement with Ramsey County, and we will include the summary that we received in your packet next month. Okay. We're on to the next item, which is a report from Scott and Mike regarding their visit with the White Bear Lake City Council.
Yeah, last week, Mike and I gave a short presentation. What you have in front of you is the notes that we used. We didn't hand this out to them. So we went through it pretty lightly, but you can see the topics, and they're all of interest to the city. I got out there, talked about the budget, the fund balances, the lake policing issues, and educational programs. Then Mike did the rest of it that you see in this sheet. And there were a few questions, no real hardball questions. We did talk a little bit about the fund balances, which is their favorite thing. For one council member at least. And what we did, so I went over how we abated the funding last year, and that brought the budget, the fund balance down to $137,000 at the end of last year, which is a little bit below that policy we passed. And everybody sort of nodded, and that's great, thank you. There was one thing, that our policy we passed last year before that was that it should be within 150 to 200% of the next year's budget. We were actually a little bit below that by the end of this year, but it looks like, it'll bounce back because we generally underspend our budget. And we're also moving, I mentioned that we're moving some of the collections into October this year. So our balance at the end of the year should be, within that range. Should be no problem. Though this one council member did encourage us to pull it down a little bit, because it's simply not right in his view that we just hang on to taxpayer money. So that was really the only thing there. Like policing issues, I did sort of indicate that there was some discussion of raising the amount, and there was no real, comment on that. So I guess that's what I'd say about my part. I don't know if, Mike, if you have any.
Well, I talked about the change in the commercial bay applications and the fact that the city, we mentioned that they'd have to have the letter from the city by January 1st, and was that workable? If we had the permits in by October 15th, then they would, at that time, request a letter from the city that, was it possible that they could do that? And they said yes.
Yeah, they shook their heads, yes, so we've.
Yeah, so, and a lot of it is, some of it is just kind of automatic. The council doesn't really have to vote on those letters. They can just do it in-house. So that, they said yes, they could do it.
Yeah. I did talk to the city manager the next day, last Wednesday, and she said it went over very well. She thought it went just fine. Thanks for doing it. So that's really all we have to say.
Okay, so I'll just add a little bit. First off, thanks for doing that. I appreciate it. The other thing is that I asked, Scott and Mike and Kim put all of this information, and each of you has a copy, together for the city of White Bear. And what I asked Kim to do, and she's done, is to put this together for each of us to be applicable to our communities that we represent. And I would ask that each of us, go in teams, it's easier, go and meet with your member cities and just talk about these similar items. And to Scott's point, they didn't hand this out, but they just used it for talking points to touch on the big items. And personally, I think that we should, as representatives, try to meet with our member communities once a year, just to see if they have any questions, to make sure that they have a good idea of what the board is doing, this kind of stuff. So that's my pitch for everyone, to use this information that Kim has developed for each of us based on what Mike and Scott put together, and go out and meet with your communities. Okay, any other questions for Scott or Mike on that item? Okay, we'll move on. Lake Quality Committee, Mike?
Lake quality. Lake level is 925.07. It stayed at 925 all summer. Water temperature is 72 degrees. And last year at this time, it was 72 degrees. And then the third item is a Phragmites bid, and you've heard about this. I promised I'd come this time to ask for money. I have the permit from the DNR. I have the bid from Lake Management. The DNR, in giving the permit, was very interested because we're being proactive on Phragmites, and it's not, a lot of lakes might have it, they might not, they don't really know how to recognize it, and I'm not sure I would, but we have professionals that do, and that's what we're relying on. And so the DNR's provided a Phragmites treatment monitoring system. It's an 8-page report, and they contacted our applicator, Lake Management. And, all these guys know everybody. They all know each other, so it's not, big deal. But our applicator agreed on their time to fill out all this monitoring stuff. And White Bear Lake the results of this will be used by the DNR, and it'll also be used by the University of Minnesota as a Phragmites kind of a template to get things going and make it happen and see what the results are. and so it'll be watched and monitored, and that's all part of the bid. That reads $129 an hour. Hourly price is based on a two-person crew and includes all material, labor, and signage. So that's kind of a good deal, but I don't know how many hours it's going to take them. Initially, last year at this time, the DNR did a plant survey for Phragmites and came up with about 4 acres in 20 different spots. And I've shown the map, and if you haven't seen it, I can give you another copy. And they're all just like little pots of this weed. And they're supposed to be slow growing, although they're a rhizome, so it grows by the roots. So those areas might have expanded a little bit. So when I did the permit, instead of 4 acres, I got the permit for 6 acres with the ability to actually change it. Now, cost, well, if it's 15 hours or 20 hours, that's like $3,000. We're not going to have the plant taken away after it dies. We're going to let it compost on site, which is the recommendation of the DNR and the applicator. If it was like a couple of acres, solid acres of it with nothing else, then you'd probably have to figure out a way to get rid of all that refuge that's there. But we're not going to do that. These are all just little spots. For weed control, we budgeted $36,000. The milfoil treatment was $28,249. So that leaves us with $7,750. So, not knowing exactly how many acres are out there, knowing that we, for sure, very doubt that we would hit that 7,000 number, I would still like to be able to have that as a limit, not to exceed $7,750 on a Phragmite permit, on a Phragmite treatment, I mean, just in case we run into a bunch more and have to treat it. But the way things are, it's I don't know, it's going to be kind of what the DNR figured it would be last fall, 4 to 6 acres. So that's it could be as much as $3,200 for that.
And just to make sure I understand, we have something like 7,000 left unspent in the budget that's already been approved.
Yes, $7,750.
And it seems like that's more than enough to get us through the Phragmites treatment.
That'll get you 60 hours worth.
Yeah. So if we run into a huge thing that was missed or overgrown, or something unforeseen, I can come back and ask for it again, but by then it's probably too late. They want to treat it. I told them if this is approved, I'll sign the contract and email it to them tomorrow, and they said by the end of the week they'd start working on it. So I guess I'd like to make a motion that for Phragmites treatment not to exceed $7,750 and to stay within budget, and thinking that it'll be less for the Phragmites treatment. That make sense?
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and so I'll ask if there's any discussion. I'll start it. Do we need a motion for this? Since the money's
Budgeted item, we're spending money. I'll feel better if we get a motion on it.
Okay.
You're budgeted, and you've been brought a request to spend it, so I would do it as a motion.
Perfect. So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
That's it for me.
Any other questions for Mike? Okay, thanks, Mike.
And by then, you should be able to come back with the invoice showing what was spent, right?
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
And maybe dragging some dead Phragmites behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, maybe not. Lake Utilization Committee, Mark?
Nothing to report. We're waiting for applications to come in for docks. But other than that, there's nothing earth-shattering right now.
Okay. Lake Education Committee, Scott?
No, nothing.
Okay. So we're on to Treasurer's Report. Diane had to miss the meeting tonight for personal reasons, so I will take this one. And I'll ask for approval of checks 4594 through 4599.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second then. And any discussion?
No.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that passes. And then there's an FYI item. on the agenda, $422 was refunded to the City of White Bear Lake for swimmer's itch treatment. So, okay, there you go.
That must be for Memorial Beach. Is there,
Do you know where that money was spent?
Offhand, I can't remember, but it does say on the invoice that they gave me.
okay. Have we already done that for the township, for their beach at Bel-Air?
The only other one I just received today, yes, was from the township to be reimbursed, yes.
Okay.
For $200 or something, yeah.
Okay. On to the next item, Board Council Report. Alan?
Thank you, Chair and members. I think I kind of covered most of the ground with you guys earlier. We'll be working and reaching out to the DNR. They're obviously still busy with some of our other items before we get into the weeds, so to speak, with the delegation of authority. So stay tuned. I assume that that's a slower burn item anyway, so our current permitting year is more important. So there's only one of them, and so that's what they're working on. I'd stand for questions, of course.
Any questions for Alan? Okay.
Thank you.
Announcements. Kim?
The only thing was just to let you know that I did send out emails to all Commercial Bay on letting them know that the rules for the October 15th, what the fees would be. And then a week later, I mailed out actual letters that explained in length what they had, what a complete package had to be, what they would be assessed, their late fee of $25 per slip per week, and so on. And then I also sent out letters to all non-commercial bay, anyone that had received a permit last year, except for the event-type ones, the same letter that we have new schedules, and I included the new fee schedule, and that the deadline was October 15th, period.
Okay.
So everybody
So
has
that
been...
went out last week?
That went out a couple weeks ago, and so with it all kind of staggered, I started at the beginning and gave them, send out one type a week, and then the next week they got another, so they would have no reason
Okay.
to say they do not know.
I know my dock association, we're having our meeting on Friday.
Okay, they would have it,
and
for sure, by
I will
now.
already check since I'm treasurer.
Oh, okay.
Make sure we know how much.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, have those new fee schedules been reflected in the application?
Yes, I updated every application that it's included in the language that's on each one of them. I updated it and have also put revised as of the date we updated it. So I let everyone know, please do not use old applications as well, because they do not have the current information. And then I also put a link in the letters where they could find the new implications on our website and so on, so they know how to get all that information as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Any questions for Kim? Okay. So we're on to item 10, adjournment. I'll make a motion that we adjourn. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you all.